Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Seth the Programmer. Today we've got Kakashi versus Gojo. So we've got Naruto versus Jujutsu Kaisen here. And I really don't know how to, go about this, because Gojo, me personally anyway, Gojo is so freaking OP within the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, but then Kakashi, at the end of Shippuden, became, the most powerful, character within the show. And I seen on Twitter that Seth said he's done some mad mathematical calculations to explain how Gojo's abilities work and everything. So gonna be interesting to see where all the work's gone. So let's check it out.
White-haired elite teachers with cool eyes,
Hell yeah.
energetic students with demons within them, and black-haired kids from a cool clan, and smart females.
Very similar.
Right?
Interesting.
They're pretty similar. So
yeah,
people make them fight to the death. Awesome. Let's just get to business right away. The actual raw destructive powers of these characters probably doesn't matter that much if they were to fight. So, for a brief answer, most people would consider things such as the Bijou from Naruto, which can create mountain-nuking explosions that can possibly show
we got the calcs here, let's go.
And fighting the Akatsuki that can take down these Bijou plus their shinobi, as stated in the data books, also known as Jinchuriki, and shown on screen as more impressive than Jujutsu Kaisen's higher feats, such as Dogon's domain expansion, where he creates something like a smaller tropical island.
Oh, wow.
In terms of the raw amount
so I'm going to get some manga spoilers here, but that's fine.
It's even worse when you incorporate Kakashi's dual Mangekyo Sharingan amps at the end of the series.
Just like I said.
Pretty blatantly is as strong, or potentially even stronger than Naruto and
Sasuke, yeah.
six-path states who are struggling against Kaguya, who, when amped slightly, can nuke dimensions with planets
Jesus.
and possibly stars in them, which JJK really doesn't have much that compares to that. Unless you think this action highlight in Dogon's domain in the manga is a star, then maybe it becomes more fair. Or unless you think Gojo is stronger than Hikari, even when he jackpots and gets infinite cursed energy, and ignore that infinite can just mean very great and say Gojo can annihilate the whole universe or something. Anyway, most people tend to agree at least that dual Mangekyo Sharingan Kakashi with his 6 paths amps in terms of raw power is stronger than what Gojo has at least shown thus far.
Right.
So why am I saying it doesn't actually matter? Well, it doesn't actually matter due to the fact that Kakashi just straight up will never hit Gojo Satoru with any normal attack whatsoever. Yes, I'm saying that Gojo's technique, the Limitless, would actually negate any of Kakashi's normal techniques or attacks, such as Kiri, Fireball Jutsu, and so on.
Okay.
But why would I, someone who is heavily against saying things that haven't been shown to work on much stronger people, say that this would work on Kakashi, who is potentially much stronger?
Yeah.
It's somewhat hypocritical considering my track record.
Go on.
That's because of the way Gojo's ability actually functions. And to be fair, when I first wrote this video, I actually theorized that Gojo's Infinity Barrier technique, which basically stops anything from touching him, was just some barrier technique that, due to him having cursed energy stronger than anybody else in his series, would negate their attacks because they're weaker than him. But as I studied more into this, this is what I actually found.
Here we go. We're going to have some mad calcs here.
What the hell is this? In Jumps in the Summer, there was a special for JJK known as the
That's really funny, I'm sorry.
Lecture, in which the JJK editor,
Jesus.
Mr. Takano, was brought on by Jump to discuss with Mr. Hino, a professor at the Institute of Statistical Mathematics, and Mr. Sonoda, a research fellow at
No way,
Institute of
okay.
Chemical Research. They basically got some heavy hitters, or as they call them, special grade mathematicians.
Yeah.
Literally, and I'm not even joking.
Literally, Jesus.
Theory deep dive on how they think the math behind Gojo's abilities works.
Oh my
and
God.
it got so complicated that they just straight up said, if you actually care, ask your math teacher for help or something.
What?
It was really awkward, actually. Considering this is worked on with the JJK editor who works on the story closely and is published by him, it's pretty credible, so let's go into what they think.
Oh my
of Gojo's
God, this is going to be interesting.
Oh,
intriguing.
Kakashi versus Gojo. The lecture they give, like I said, and even they themselves say, is pretty complicated, and I'll sum it up for you guys in a few basic steps and theories that they give. One of the first theories given for his ability is that the Limitless, which draws a universal concept known as infinity into the forefront of a battle, actively creates and uses said infinity within any space Gojo desires.
Okay, this is gonna be funny. This is gonna be great.
Which would explain his famous hand sign, where he's showing almost a pinch motion to Jogo. You're touching the infinity between us, as he can can create an infinity between any distance. To get into it, for instance, the difference between infinity and 1 is infinite, but Gojo may be able to exaggerate every frame between something like 1 to 0
What?
to create an infinity as well. An example being,
Go
take
on.
1 and 0.
Yeah.
Between 1 and 0, you could have 0.1,
0.2.
0,
Oh,
0,
right,
1,
okay, yeah.
0,
Oh,
0,
right.
0, 0, 1, etc.,
And
etc.
on
Any
and on and on and on.
infinite amount of 0, 0, zeros you
Yeah.
want in between 1 and 0 that way. Or if you need an even simpler example, say you have 1 and 0 and divide it by half. So
Yeah, you got 0.5 in the
say
middle, yeah.
1 and 0 are two different spots on your floor. Then after you go halfway through it, go halfway again. Then again, then again, and then again. And you can technically keep having the remaining half distance infinitely. You can make a half of any distance you want forever. Similar to the concept of Achilles and the tortoise proposed by an ancient Greek philosopher named Zeno, which Gojo, funny enough, actually brings up himself in the manga. The theory is that if Achilles were to race a tortoise that was given a head start, that the amount of distance between him and the tortoise would always be infinite and would require an infinite amount of steps to reach the tortoise. As Achilles, whenever he reached halfway to the tortoise, would continually have to keep going to the next halfway point between he and the tortoise over and over and over again. And since there are infinite halfway points, as whenever you reach halfway to something, there's a new halfway point, you'd have to do it forever. As could theoretically be an infinite amount of points between any distance.
Interesting.
Not only theoretically making motion impossible, but making Achilles move slower and slower the closer he got to the tortoise, as every halfway point remaining
is
between him
further.
and the tortoise would just get smaller and smaller
Yeah,
until
sorry.
Achilles just looked like he wasn't moving anymore.
Yeah.
Of course, you could debunk Zeno's tortoise paradox by quite literally punching him in the face and then saying, "Oh, I thought my fist would never reach you," or something. But in this universe of JJK, Gojo is implying that something like that would become more realistic, using infinity and cursed energy. As we know, there are many curse techniques that actually straight up manipulate reality, with Limitless and Gojo probably not being too dissimilar. And in fact, Gojo actually says he can create possibilities using these techniques in the manga himself. But something that is more likely is actually something that Gojo sort of also implies. The next theory would then be is something like the Riemann series theorem, which is way too much to fully explain
Riemann series theorem.
But in short, you can explain how Gojo could manipulate space using infinity and limitless to diverge something this way or change its distance, even with an infinite series that ends with a finite result. Here's an example using something called the alternating harmonic series or a conditionally convergent series. Which
Never
is,
heard of
again,
any of
something
these.
Gojo
I'm not a
mentions,
mathematician,
and
so
rearranging it to change its result despite having virtually the same qualities from before, but rearranged. Let me show you an example. So
this is blowing my mind. This is absolutely blowing my mind.
You subtract 1/2, add 1/3, minus 1/4, add 1/5, minus 1/6, add 1/7, and then you do this forever. You basically create a series, and then the result of that would actually be a logarithmic 2, and I'll show why that is on the screen now.
Okay.
But then, something you could then do is, by changing the order, say you then go 1, then minus 1/2, then minus 1/4, plus 1/3,
Switching
minus
stuff around.
1/6, minus 1/8, plus 1/5, minus 1/10, and then so on and so on. And you kept everything that was in the original series, but changed the order, it would actually be half the results of the original. So, by simply changing the order of
Just
our
switching stuff
series,
around.
or our conditionally convergent series, or our alternating harmonic series, we actually get half the result of what we got despite it having the same exact thing
numbers
within it, just in a different order.
Why are you late?
The theory then is that Gojo can manipulate
Jesus.
orders of space between he and his opponent with positive and negative things like blue, red, etc., which can manipulate space, from what we know, and thus change the actual distance between he and his opponent, negating any attack that comes towards him, as they just simply diverge and never reach him regardless of strength. As has been somewhat proven using Riemann theorem, you can get any result between 2 points if you can freely reorganize the series between them like Gojo is implied to be able to do. The final theory is that Gojo is sort of manipulating the concepts of near and far, and giving the perception that his opponents are moving farther than they actually are. With an example being he bends the density of space to become more dense the closer you get to him, to give the illusion that you have traveled farther than in actuality. There's
what you've actually done.
But I don't want to get into detail because I sort of disagree with the idea of perception manipulation being what Limitless is. Examples of this being in Gojo versus Jogo. Yeah, really interesting names. Jogo shoots a fire blast that completely surpasses the distance and all around Gojo. Yet it doesn't actually touch him specifically. Unless Gojo is giving Jogo's fireballs perception, then confusing their perception, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for this to be the case.
Right.
This also happens whenever Gojo is clearly within an explosion or any type of blast that engulfs his entire body or the entire area. So unless the Gojo we are seeing is an illusion, which doesn't seem to be the case, then it is not perception manipulation.
Right.
However, that theory isn't technically impossible either. Finally, I'll just tell you all what I believe is the limitless technique, and it's probably the most simple answer. In the Jujutsu Kaisen movie for Volume 0, we see a Jujutsu sorcerer named Miguel face Gojo, and he explains Gojo's red technique, which he probably learned from Getzo, who is Gojo's basically best friend. And in the manga, he states that Gojo manipulates space on an atomic level, but in the movie adaptation, which many in the JJK fandom consider still canon due to the author's comments on many, many reasons, Miguel actually says that Gojo manipulates not just space, but Gojo actually manipulates space-time itself, the fabric of our universe. Red is actually an extension of the Limitless, and then uses infinity as an engine, as stated in the Summer Jump special earlier I already mentioned. And if you simply state that he manipulates space-time to actually manipulate the distance between he and his opponents, using theories like Zeno's paradox and so forth, everything begins to make a lot more sense. The way he fights his opponents, warping their bodies, his ability to teleport, his ability to manipulate distance between he and others, the ability to generate infinite information, his ability to remove things from existence with things like purple, and even the ability to float in the air and seemingly remove his mask, all things make much more sense with this concept in mind. This would also explain why Gojo, while trapped in, say, the timeless prison realm, spoiler, can still affect the realm and surprise an extremely intelligent character named Kenjaku and talk while there is no time within it, as he himself can manipulate time and space. Either that, or Gojo can just move without time, and he's just beyond infinite.
Beyond time at all.
Wow. Anyway, the time-space interpretation also makes much more sense when later characters are stated to manipulate reality in any way they want, such as Takuba's power of comedian, where he can make anything he finds funny literally a reality.
Oh, what? That's a really interesting technique. That's so cool.
The abilities like Red, which Gojo explains as a void in space, and even Hollow Purple, which is based on a negative hollow-looking equation in reality that removes things from existence using imaginary numbers and concepts, also makes much more sense with this. Shonen Jump's objective conclusion at the end of the math segment, without any theories or whatever, their final statement was this: using the limitless curse technique Red and Blue, Gojo can do conversion and change the scale of distance between him and his opponent. Of course, that is a simple breakdown, but that is what it is.
It's very simple, isn't it?
Many detractors will try to claim that Gojo only slows people down, which he in fact does. However, also in this special states that it slows them down and then stops them as well. Due to these space-time manipulations and highly likely theories of how infinity works, Kakashi will more than likely never just be able to say, simply punch Gojo in the face, like you could to Zeno after he told you his tortoise paradox. So, does this mean Kakashi can't beat Gojo? No. This is actually where the real fight would then begin. The battle of the Mangekyo Sharingan versus the
That's what I was like, he's like, can't he just snipe his head off?
Kakashi was ever unable to touch Gojo with conventional attacks, and Gojo is even remotely
so it's going to have to be Genjutsu based to get him.
Put Kakashi on guard. He would undoubtedly resort to using his ocular jutsu Kamui, eventually, with dual Mangekyo Kakashi resorting to the Kamui Shuriken and Kamui Raikiri, respectively. Some people believe that if a character can move at light speed, that they can actually bypass Gojo's Limitless, since Gojo manipulates space and time on an atomic level, and light is made of
Can't wait for Fire Force to come back, actually, now I've seen it, anyway.
That Gojo is stated to manipulate. The reason this wouldn't work with Kakashi is because even if Kakashi did move at light speed, theoretically, he himself is not just photons. He's just moving as fast as light, made of photons. Kind of a argument by the community, but yes, he would still need his Mangekyo powers. The next one is people thinking you can blitz and bypass infinity with speed beyond what it is shown to stop before. However, unfortunately, after Gojo faces Toji, his infinity is usually pretty much always active, and due to the discussion earlier, would just always be warping space around his body to permanently diverge anything that goes through said space to never touch him regardless of finite speed. It's not a speed or reactionary thing, it's just the literal space around him doesn't lead to him in any conventional way. One reason people think this is because when Gojo was initially mastering his Limitless barrier, that he used to distinguish threats of people, then act accordingly. However, many JJK fans will currently say that he has a passive barrier that is always active regardless of threat gauge, that he can alter the properties of manually afterward if he has to. He also has a limitless limitless amount of stamina that infinitely regenerates, and thus limitless is always active. This may sound like
crazy.
I'm giving Gojo a lot of the benefit of the doubt, which I am, to be fair, but this does not mean Kakashi can't win, as I stated earlier, and even if it is all true, and giving both sides the benefit of the doubt and still proving a conclusion makes it much more convincing than if I were to try to downplay Gojo or not give him everything he has, which I'll show you. Anyway, let's get to the actual Mangekyo powers.
Here we go.
Kamui, which is basically Kakashi's ability to rip open a hole in space and time into the Kamui realm, would straight up rip Gojo in half, at least the normal variation of Kamui.
Yeah.
And assuming that Gojo we always see is in some kind of illusion or something, and Kakashi wouldn't just be like negging an illusion made by Infinity, which I would extremely doubt since when he fought Toji and turned off his limitless curse technique and deactivated Infinity, Gojo was still where everyone thought he was.
Right, so that takes that out of it.
Doesn't actually travel to someone, so it wouldn't actually travel through the Infinity between him and Gojo. It would actually spawn or just appear on Gojo's body and just start ripping him in half. You could argue that Kakashi might spawn Kamui on Infinity when he's looking at Gojo, since Infinity is technically between him and Kakashi at all times. However, due to Infinity actually being everywhere at all times, you don't actually perceive or visually see this Infinity. Gojo more so manipulates what's always
bring
around
it into reality. Wow, just brings it in, right?
Kakashi would actually see just Gojo, and if he spawned a Kamui, it would spawn on Gojo's body. In which the only way he's surviving it is if he can manipulate the spatial properties of his own body and just sort of negate being spatially warped away. Which may be possible, but once again, judging off of that Toji fight, his body seems to actually take damage even after his cursed energy can reactivate, and he doesn't just reform everything in his body normally. It seems like he has to regenerate. So from there, we have to actually gauge the speed of Kamui versus Gojo to make sure he can't just teleport away from it using blue or whatever and run like Deidara did, because if you guys didn't know, Gojo can actually teleport with a hand sign.
Well, there we go.
But just by clapping his hands together. If we use the War Art Kakashi's Kamui as an example, and not DMS yet, War Art Kakashi alongside Obito's Kamui, amping the Kamui's speed to 2 times, could react and warp things faster than Ten Tails Madara's True Seeking Orbs. These True Seeking Orbs are able to somewhat move comparatively in speed to Might Guy in the 8th Gate and 7th Gate, with characters like Minato,
who's one of the fastest people going,
Kakashi somewhat struggling to react to them otherwise, although they could react to them. With all these characters being much faster than the likes of Haku from the Land of Waves, who could fling himself between mirrors at the speed of light, which Guy and Rock Lee also react to during the war, or much faster than Kid Kakashi, who could chop a lightning bolt in half.
Lightning bolts last light speed.
Orb should also be faster than Darwie's laser circus, which is literally just light reflecting off of water and then moving through the air. It should be faster than the 4th Raikage and Killer Bee's lariat, which usually is in base or with a few version 1 one-tailed cloaks, which is stated to move at the speed of light in the database.
Crazy.
Kakashi also uses this Kamui to rip off Deidara's arm while he's in mid-combat, despite his Kamui being in a much weaker state.
Perfected it yet.
Shippuden, and is implied to be able to react to Kakuzu's jutsu mid-combat if he had to, and can also react to pain in mid-combat, and so forth. It's implied to at least be relative in speed to him at the bare minimum. Jujutsu Kaisen, due to being a newer shonen, doesn't actually have a lot of speed feats, and it actually all clocks in at under the speed of lightning for pretty much everything, which is for the most part slower than Kakashi as a chakra-drained child. This isn't to say that Gojo couldn't be faster, it's just that we don't really know, sort of like a Saitama
got speed
situation,
feats.
sort of assume he's much faster than we've seen. Unless you think him reacting to, say, something like Joko in his domain gives him instantaneous reaction speed, as domains always hit their target pretty much instantly. Or you think he has some kind of infinite speed for talking in a realm without time, like the prison realm later. With those, Gojo could easily clap his hands, use time-space manipulation, and then avoid Kamui. Otherwise, he just pretty much gets ripped in 2, and that's about that. If Gojo can't survive Kamui, he can then activate his own domain expansion called Limitless Void. Limitless Void spawns an orb around its target and is guaranteed to hit its opponent no matter what. It's kind of a point of the versus ability. Inside this domain, Gojo kind of injects the target with multiple different infinities worth of information. That sounds insane.
Overwhelming,
infinities worth, but I'm not actually exaggerating. A good example is, imagine Kakashi saw an apple in his life one time. And instead of seeing this apple or hearing an apple an infinite amount of times, Kakashi would first see, hear, and perceive the letter A from apple infinitely first, then P,
and then P
the next
again.
P, and then the the L, the E, and then Apple for infinity, over and over and over again. This happens until the target absorbs so much information that they cannot move and eventually die.
You can't even, like,
also, what this looks
grasp
like
that.
is in 0.2 seconds, the Limitless Void will inject 6 months of information into its target. 0.2 seconds. For reference, remember that the Tsukuyomi in Naruto Part 1 that Itachi used on Kakashi gave him 3 days worth of pain and information, and he was sent to the hospital. While I think Tsukuyomi is a little bit stronger than Limitless Void isn't an illusion and isn't something the Sharingan can simply reflect or ignore. It's
interesting.
Physical information that is being injected from the universe.
Yeah, it's not an illusion being thrown in.
Did only give Kakashi 3 days of information and was actually trying to spare him and go easy on him.
Yeah, he did,
and
didn't he? Yeah.
Itachi can make you live out your entire life instantly. And
of course, like with his girlfriend.
In this case, Gojo is pretty much somewhat similar and can actually give you actual infinities of information you can't just reflect or avoid. Due to this, Gojo would more than likely be able to actually kill Kakashi, at least pre-DMS, with his domain expansion, or pre-Mangekyo Kakashi. Especially if Kakashi can't hurt Gojo with conventional attacks, and can't land calmly for whatever reason. It's pretty much guaranteed that Part 1 Kakashi is getting bodied by Gojo.
Yeah,
but
I'd say that.
That is unless you think with DMS or even Mangekyo Sharingan, Kakashi has the mind space and ocular prowess to handle infinite amounts of information. A good example is how Itachi can actually generate that kind of information and tolerate himself using his Mangekyo Sharingan, and with DMS Kakashi easily surpassing Itachi's ocular prowess, and can even potentially surpass or rival the top tiers of the entire Naruto Shippuden verse, like Six Paths Naruto, Renegon Sasuke, Ten Tails of Madara, and etc. He can also spam Kamui and is intangible at will, although his Kamui is more projectile based with Shuriken, so it's more debatable if it would actually go through infinity straight up. It's possible he could cut through the manipulated space of Gojo's infinity, however. One last final thing to go over for Kakashi's sake. This mainly would only apply to Part 1 Kakashi, as I mainly discussed the main win con for Kakashi during the War Arc and DMS, which is the premise of this video, is his Mangekyo abilities, his space-time manipulation, and his resistances. But for Part 1 Kakashi, an interesting win con, since he doesn't have Mangekyo abilities, or he does, but he can't necessarily use them since he can barely use his normal Sharingan, is of course his Genjutsu and his ocular Genjutsu abilities. The reason I didn't really talk about this too much, once again, due to the win cons, and also because Genjutsu working on other universes could be its own video topic entirely.
It's always the way, isn't it? It's like, yeah, but you don't understand how it worked within the concept of the universe. It's like,
network within them, which is sort of a Naruto exclusive thing. It's almost like a circulatory system, but for chakra within your body that you're born with, that interlinks with all your organs. So even like energy equation wouldn't necessarily give you a chakra network. It's sort of like a biological just difference. But if you were to equate chakra and say cursed energy, and say that Kakashi could use Genjutsu and ocular Genjutsu on someone like Gojo, then you'd be able to say, okay, he could cast illusions on Gojo, and considering that Gojo is sort of a loudmouth and might tell Kakashi...
Yeah, he would hint at stuff like would help, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Usually when people are fighting,
Kakashi could possibly figure out how to get around it, though.
About how his abilities work. Then Kakashi, who has an IQ over 200 higher than Shikamaru's in Shippuden, would probably be able to deduce how infinity works.
Well, yeah, like he'd do like a Sasuke thing, like where Sasuke fought against
Zabuza and Land of Waves. He'd be able to hypnotize Gojo.
What was the guy's name? Danzo. And he tricks Danzo into thinking stuff like for the win. He could do stuff like that.
Kill Gojo, as well as the fact if you think ocular jutsu would work on Gojo. As far as we know, Gojo doesn't actually have any illusion or mental mind hacks resistances.
Like any protection against it.
Effects. However, even ocular jutsu and genjutsu might not work against Gojo if you actually think that infinity would just deflect or block all chakra interference that Kakashi would be sending to Gojo's body. As you know, things like ocular genjutsu, specifically Mangekyo genjutsu in the novels, actually injects your chakra into the other person, and if infinity actually determines that as a threat, or Gojo would determine that as a threat, or even if you just say infinity would just do it anyway, then the chakra that is being used during the genjutsu would never actually reach Gojo's body and would just simply diverge, and even then genjutsu wouldn't work either. So that's why I didn't really bring it up and make it too much of a focus of this video. It's not important really at all. The main win cons are once again, how fast do you think Gojo is? Do you think Kakashi's Kamui can rip him in half and bypass infinity? And do you think maybe Gojo's has infinite power or something crazy like that? With that, I'll leave it up to you guys. It depends on what speed you think Gojo has. Do you think he reacts to instantaneous attacks in Jogo's domain? Is he moving in a timeless void due to his speed?
So
do you
weird,
think Gojo has infinite power due to scaling above Hakari's jackpot, etc., etc.? Do you think the DMS can handle infinite void because of Itachi's Tsukuyomi, which is described as above time and space and all earthly things? Would Kakashi just blitz calmly destroy Gojo before a fight even began? Etc., etc., etc. Regardless, it's a pretty interesting matchup. And
it is an interesting one when you put all that forwards.
Why you could argue for either, and I'd love to see what you guys think, as this is probably one of the more interesting and awesome matchups I've had to look into for quite a while.
I mean, it looks like you had to do a hell of research for it.
Fact for this video, and in fact, might be the most important fact of the video. Did you know that Akutami, the author of Jujutsu Kaisen, actually comments on Gojo versus Kakashi? I'm not joking. So, the creator of Gojo actually says this. In the JJK fanbook, I often hear people say that it's cool that Gojo has powers like Kakashi Sensei, but all I can say to that is that he's not really on the same level as Kakashi Sensei. So, this is more than likely him implying that Gojo is inferior to Kakashi, at least in terms of their powers. Whether this is DMS Kakashi, Boruto Kakashi, or just normal War Art Kakashi is debatable. I'd argue it's more than likely DMS Kakashi.
Interesting that they said that though. Like, wow.
They said fights a dimension-busting god, basically, and has a lot of things that could potentially counter Gojo, like Kamui Spam and things like that. And it's also him at his strongest at the end of Naruto Shippuden, whereas War Art Kakashi would just sort of be like a random middleman Kakashi to decide. It's kind of arbitrary. And Boruto Kakashi we haven't seen the full abilities of. Either that, or Akutami is saying Gojo would slam Kakashi on his neck, which would be surprising, to say the least. Not impossible, but surprising. Anyway, thank you for watching.
Boss video. Boom. Love it. That was really cool. Like, the amount of research that went into that is just crazy. The math were just blowing my brain. The math was blowing my brain. It's been a while since I watched a Seth video where I'm just like, oh my god, what the hell is he going on about? But that's fun, because that reminds me when I started off, like, watching all these verses things, like, what the friggin' hell is he going on about? This is so crazy. But, yeah, that was cool. Yeah, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video, I upload links in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. Thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you want to. Leave comments down below. Let me know that you want to discuss it in future videos. And I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.